The problem is, if you're a super, super typical profile, probably there's not a lot of spots left because that's the biggest application, one of the biggest application pools. So the class might already have a large percentage of them. So that profile might have more, it might not impossible, but it's going to be more competitive. But if you're going to apply, you just want to make sure that you really do stand out and you show incredible fit with the school. They only have a few spots left. They need to know that you want to be there. You're an asset to them if you come into the program. The biggest risk in your essay is not taking a risk. And I think that's how you stand out. Take a risk. Really say who you are and show who you are. Don't bore them. Seriously, their life, it's not the easiest job to be an admissions reader. Make sure you're answering the question. They don't have to look and go, what's he referring to? What? Make it flow, engage them, try to connect with them on a personal level, on a level as a person. They have to, I think, number one, do a self-assessment, like how, are they really prepared? Like, do they have what the schools, the basic requirements to do the self-assessment? Number two, be truly realistic and make a school list that is realistic. And number three, be extremely strategic.
Hey, MBA hopefuls, we are live on the air with MBA Waves, talking all things business and education. And please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, which helps us to continue to create all this free content for you on your MBA journey. Today on episode 157, we're bringing the focus on round 3. We're here to talk today about when round 3 can be a good option, what do business schools love, and how can you nail those essays? I'm your host for today, joined by my co-hosts Krithika Srinivasan and Bara Sapir. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
And today we have a special guest, our friend and colleague, veteran MBA Waves guest Candy, Lee LaBalle of MBA Clarity. Big welcome.
Except it's LaBalle, not LaBelle.
LaBalle.
LaBalle.
All right, so let's just jump right into it, guys. Candy, since you're our guest, you can always have first crack at the answer. So could you just give us like a quick overview of the round system and admissions chances for business school admissions for MBA hopefuls tuning in today?
Specifically for round 3? You want me to give an overview of round 3 or?
No, like the round system in general.
Round system. So actually I wrote an article about this once called, You Spin Me Round, 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 because the rounds can be very confusing. For the majority of the schools, it's pretty straightforward. Round 1 is usually in September, could be early September, could be late September. Round 2 is almost always the first week of January. And then round 3 can be March, April, something along those lines. A handful of schools have 4 rounds, like NYU Stern. A lot of European schools have 4 rounds. And actually, Columbia has finally got on board. They're doing rounds now. They used to be the rolling school, so they were kind of like the standout, but no. So that's how it works. You apply in one of, like, there's sets. You have to apply in a round. You can't just apply whenever. So you have to apply for a round 1, for round 2, or round 3.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a good summary of it.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something specific about round 3?
And,
yeah, sure. So as you guys know, probably like all of us have worked in MBA admissions consulting, and the question is, when should I apply? Oh, I've heard I can only apply in round 1. I'll never get in unless I apply in round 1, which of course is not true. Most schools have very hefty round 1s and round 2s, and there's lots of places in the classroom for both, whether you do round 1 or round 2. Really, what people should be asking is, what round am I ready for, right? So if you think you're going to apply in round 1, you need to be ready. Do you have a good test score? Do you have your recommenders on board? Do you have your essays? Do you do your school research? There's so many little pieces you have to do. And if you've done all those things and you are ready, then sure, go for round 1. But if you're not ready, it doesn't make sense to go for round 1 and do it poorly. Just wait to round 2. There really is not much difference between round 1 and round 2 in terms of admit competitiveness, that sort of thing. But you guys want to hear about round 3?
Yeah. I mean, like what I always say in terms of like a golden rule, if there ever was one in MBA admissions, like earlier is better, but never at the expense of a top quality application, right? So making sure everything is as good as it can be. And as you said, you're ready. And while you just said between rounds 1 and 2, in terms of like maybe seats available or probability of getting admitted isn't too much of a difference. What about round 3? What's different here?
So they have so most schools have a round 3 in the US, right? And it's kind of like, it's the late time rounds. It's March, April type thing. I don't know if it's made for anyone, but I'll never forget, I was in an admissions conference, which I think some of you were there too. And we had an admissions director from Stanford who was saying, we have round 3 because there's people, there's always room for somebody, so round 3 exists because there are still spots in the school. Right? There's still spots to fill up. They may be very, very few spots, but there are spots to fill up. So they have round 3. The only exception would be Harvard, which just kind of cut round 3 out. With Harvard, it's round 1 or round 2. That's it. But everyone else should have it, and there are spots. The problem is, if you're a super, super typical profile, like I always say, if you're a male who studied engineering, you work in consulting, and you play soccer, probably there's not a lot of spots left because that's the biggest application, one of the biggest application pools. So the class might already have, a large percentage of them. So that profile might have more, it might not impossible, but it's going to be more competitive,
Yeah, schools definitely focus on that diversity. And so if you're from an overrepresented population, that is definitely something to consider. And part of it is you never know which population is going to be the most overrepresented on a given year, right? That's one of the big variables. Some things you can guess, but
well, the MBBers and that sort of investment bankers, you can assume they're going to be a big application pool in certain cultural backgrounds as well. So it does become a little bit more competitive in that sense. And also kind of, but again, there's spots, and there's spots for a lot of reasons. They haven't filled up for whatever reason, but something happens. What is it called, Eric? Bleed? Is that what it's called when people say, yes, I'll attend, and then they don't?
Ghosting.
So like during round 1, a lot of people will get offers, hey, we're Wharton, we want you in our class from Chicago booth, come on, you're admitted. And people are like, if I got into Chicago booth, maybe, and they might try a Harvard or Stanford, and they get a Harvard and Stanford. They've already told Chicago booth yes, so now they bleed off. So Chicago booth was expecting them, and that usually happens later in the year because people are doing round 2, seeing what they can get. So now Chicago booth, which is an M7, has spots open. Now, it might not be a lot, but there are spots open. And so that's another reason why spots appear, because people bleed off, or they just don't attend, or lots of different reasons. People accept an admit and then not actually attend. So
I haven't heard that term before, but I love it.
What's the ethics of that? What's the ethics of that? That you tell a school that like it's almost like an early decision. And
it's not really decisions, it's just regular decisions.
It's just regular?
Okay. Yeah, I don't think there's any, maybe there's an ethical thing. I don't know about that. I always come from the point of the applicant, and the applicant needs to do what's best for them,
Right.
And if it's best for you to not attend, then don't attend,
Might as well take the opportunity to distinguish what is different about early decision, if you wouldn't mind, Candy.
So some schools have an early decision. I think Duke, for example, has early decision. Who else? Maybe Tuck has early decision. What that means is they have
Georgetown, I think, Darden.
Yeah. So what it means is they have an earlier round. So sometimes it's also in the beginning of September or October. And it means that you do sign a paper. You sign an ethical agreement, well, in your application that says, if you admit me, I will 100% attend. Right. And so that does have a commitment. Whether it's upholdable in court, I don't know, but it is sort of a commitment that you make to the school. So especially if you know 100%, I want to go to Duke and I only want to go to Duke, then it makes so much sense to apply. But I wouldn't do it as like a protection or safety, like, oh, I'll apply an early decision just to be safe. That's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because as you all know, the application process is holistic. And when you're applying to a school, not only are they evaluating you holistically, but your passion and insights and desire for the school comes out across the whole thing. And if you don't really want to go to that school, it's probably going to be obvious to admissions.
Shines through.
Mm-hmm. And Kelly, when you were mentioning about these rounds, one thing that struck me was for international applicants, it's always round 1 and round 2. So they would want to keep that in mind when they're approaching this because of all the visa situation and how long it takes. And one more thing that came to mind as you were speaking about people who had this option of considering round 1 as like more like maybe like testing the waters. and then actually applying to round two for some of their preferred schools, because they might be better, and that is also there. Yeah. And of course, the other way around is like using round one for the top preferences. And if they don't get in, round two becomes your backups and so on. So the good news about the round system is that it allows a lot of flexibility in the planning if you could use it well, right? So
Definitely.
that's, could you tell us more about the potential risks and rewards associated with round three specifically?
Yeah. Well, first of all, as regarding internationals, if you go to most schools, American schools, if you go to their website.
Well, Krithika, I think you've cut off. Did you say potential risks?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So most schools, most of the top schools in the US, they will literally have a disclaimer about round three. International students highly, discouraged to apply in round three, or sometimes just they don't accept it. Why? Exactly that reason, because of the visa. Some countries might take longer than other countries to get the visa. There could be backups. And if classes are starting in August and you got the admin, I guess if you apply in round three, you would know around May. That might not be enough time. So yeah, that can be a big concern as well. So the potential risks would be that, can you get the visa in time? The potential risks, can you organize your life in time? Because if you're working full time, or you're living across the country, some kind of way you get everything prepared within 3 or 4 months to get to the new place. So there's that kind of risk as well. There's also, it's not a risk, but there is scholarship money at a lot of schools, whether it's merit fellowships or different types of scholarships. They're often gone by round three, right? Depends on the school. And I say it's kind of a risk because you can't even guarantee that. Not everyone's going to get financial aid or scholarships, but if you apply in round three, it's highly unlikely that you'll get them, for sure. So I think that could be a risk as well. And like I was saying to you before, the classes are very full at this point. There's only a few spots left. So if your profile is super, super typical, you might not make it through, right? And so that's another big risk. You have to really think about that. And what you were saying, Krithika, about some people will do, treat round one as sort of like the practice, or they'll treat round one as, I'll do all the big schools. All that's super personal. I've heard every different kind of combination from people, including I get a lot of people who are like, this year I'm only applying to Harvard and Stanford because if I don't get it, I'll just keep working. And that's their strategy. They're applying over years instead of rounds. So I think that's all super personal. But sometimes you just have to apply a round through. Maybe you applied in round 1 and 2 and didn't get in. Maybe you got a late start. Maybe something happened in your life and that's coming up. So if you're going to apply in round 3, remember you need to make yourself stand out, especially if you're in a very typical applicant pool. You definitely have to make yourself stand out, which you have to do that in all rounds, but in round 3, really especially. Round 3 often is super successful for real outliers, teachers who are transitioning to ed tech, or military people, or that kind of like filmmakers. So I've had a lot of very interesting round 3 family companies, that sort of thing. But if you're going to apply, you just want to make sure that you really do stand out and you show incredible fit with the school, right? Why? They only have a few spots left. They need to know that you want to be there. You're an asset to them if you come into the program. So you really have to, you can't rush it. Like, one of the things that I think would be a mistake is being like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. I think I might do an MBA. I'm up right now. And then you haven't even done any school research. That doesn't even make sense.
Candy, let me follow up with what you just said there. Knowing that your profile is your profile, more or less, like you either working in consulting or you're working as a dancer or something more original and unique, right? So that's not going to change.
Right.
Also knowing that in every round, you have to find a way to stand out. What are some, if it's okay to ask, some concrete or specific ways that we could advise people how to stand out as a round 3 applicant?
Well, I think as an applicant in general, like, really you do have to stand out in every round, but I think it's finding what's unique about you. So a lot of times I'll start with the resume with my applicants and I'll read their resume and they'll be like, okay, I'm a financial analyst at KPMG or whatever. And then they list, analyze books and do this modeling and that modeling. And I'm like, okay, that's what every financial analyst at this kind of, like, you're not, where are you? So I think that's the first place. Within your job, okay, I'm a consultant at A.T. Kearney. Great. You consult clients, you do digital transformations, but what makes you special? oh, well, there was that time, I was on that project and the manager got sick and then the other one got sick and I had to lead it and I was only there 1.5 years. Like, find a way to work on that. You work that into your resume. You brought in
It's storytelling.
a new thing. You have to kind of really think beyond the bullet points, beyond the job description, and your resume should just be about you and how amazing you are and the impact you've had. So that would be the first way to look at it. Do you agree?
I love it.
Yeah. I would say that going beyond the obvious, don't tell us things that we already know about maybe the job or the profession or what.
Yeah.
All
I would tell them if the resume sounds like a job recruitment ad, it's not. You gotta definitely change it. Everyone knows what a consultant does. Everyone knows what a product manager does, but they don't necessarily know what you do. So you have to kind of amp it up that sort of way. I'm sorry, Eric, what was your question?
No, I was saying, like, knowing that you have to stand out in every round, how do you stand out even more in round 3? And I think you answered that in a very...
Yeah, well, but it's also in other things. And again, I always start with the resume with my clients because, as I'm interviewing and doing the intake, I'm thinking about their resume. We're talking about all sorts of things. You also want to take it to the next level, in your extracurriculars, right? So a lot of times people will be like, interest, basketball. And I get to talk to them. It's like, well, they actually started a basketball team at their school that didn't have one. And then when they got older, they created a fundraiser. And so it's actually, there's a lot more than just basketball. So we go deeper into that. So you just kind of have to look, find what makes you unique, find what makes you stand out. And don't be afraid to share it. Like I always say, start with the resume, but then also in the essays. So I have a LinkedIn friend, someone I met on LinkedIn. I've never met him in person. And he one time said to me, the biggest risk in your essay is not taking a risk. And I think that's how you stand out. Take a risk, really say who you are and show who you are. And it's scary. It can be scary because you're applying to Stanford, or Kellogg's like, oh, they want to hear this. And it's like, they want to hear about you. I think that's what you have to remember, whether it's round 3, round 1, or round 2, for sure. And yeah, definitely stand out within all aspects.
So what keeps on rolling in my head is like, the Dalai Lama will get in at whatever round that the Dalai Lama applies for business school, right? Like, the person who really stands out is going to be accepted. Most likely.
Well, as long as they have the other stuff, right? They're smart. Right. And yeah, I don't think round 3 is a time to go in with below average, scores, low test scores. I think that's, if that's the case, you might want to wait until round 1 and improve your profile.
That actually brings up like the perfect segue, because I was wondering, what are the factors to consider if you do wait until applying to round 1? The next for the next.
Well, I think it's a very personal decision, and I would never tell an applicant, no, don't do it. That literally is their decision. But I'll try to help you be self-reflective. It's like, okay, you've only taken the GMAT once. Your score is okay, not great. You really haven't talked to anyone at the school. Like, there's a lot of reasons why you're hurting your application. So think about that. Sometimes they're like, yeah, you're right, I'm going to wait till round 1. Other times they're like, no, I have to do it now. If I don't get accepted this year, my wife's going to be whatever. It was the family. Sometimes there's just reasons, so they have to make that decision. But if you really do have weaknesses in your profile, probably your odds are not good, and you're going to look at round 1 for sure. Which a lot of people say, well, maybe I shouldn't apply in round 3 because they don't like reapplicants. Like, the number of time I hear people say to me, oh, I heard they don't like reapplicants, and I'm like, I never heard this. I've helped 700 applicants. So there's no school that doesn't like reapplicants. And then they're like, well, I applied in round 3. How much can I really change by round 1? There's always ways you can enhance your application between round 3 and round 1. So if you really feel like you have to do it for whatever reason, then you have to do it.
I just want to agree with you. I mean, on the contrary, like, schools love reapplicants. I can't tell you how many admissions directors from top programs have actually said that we love reapplicants. I'm talking about all the top schools that you can think of.
Yeah. I mean, of course, that reapplicant has to do better this time around, right?
Yeah. Specific strategy and show growth and improvement, advancement, new challenges.
And it's always about fixing those weaknesses that that exist when you compare to a certain profile. But it's not just a certain profile like an average, but it's also about what can be expected in your applicant pool. As you again mentioned, like a consultant or an investment banker, or even from a certain region of the world, again and again, you want to show that, hey, look, I'm not the same as the other person. I have something else to bring to the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not being afraid to share it. I think that's really important. And writing, for every round, but answer the questions. I think that I do see, I know you probably see it as well. People come to me after they've been dinged. Can you check what happened? What went wrong? And I read their essays. I'm like, you didn't answer the question. That would be number one. And I think why, not because they're dumb, not because they're whatever, it's because they're intimidated. Oh, yeah, I have to say how great I am and how great I fit. But if the question is, what's the biggest commitment you ever made, or the question is, what makes you unique? You answer that question, right? So I think that is something very important as well, across the rounds, for sure. And yeah. So I think that one of the other questions you guys were asking me was, what is the ideal timeline for preparing? I mean, ideally, you should have a year advanced to be a great applicant. What happens in round 2, as you might know, a lot of people come last minute to the table, round 3 as well. So ideal, you would have 3, 4, 5, 6 months. I'm not sure what is the perfect time, but that's usually never the case with a round 2 or round 3. Usually they're starting short, and you have to be very strategic, right? You'll think about where you're applying, think about your odds, the competitiveness, your fit, and then kind of like work it out. If you've only got a couple months to round 3, you might want to apply to schools that have similar applications, right? So Chicago Booth SA1, Wharton SA1, LBS SA1, Columbia SA, they're all a goals essay. So if you're able to execute Chicago Booth, well, you've done a really big chunk on getting the next one executed, rather than doing things that are so completely outlier, right? So as you all know, Duke is a very intensive application, and if you're going to apply to Duke and you only have a month, you might not really have time to apply to other schools. It really depends. Or Stanford. That's another one. That Stanford takes a lot of effort and soul bearing and time. So ideally, you would have more time for that, but I don't think that's usually the case in round 3.
I also want to put a plug in that your test scores last for 5 years. And so if you ever have the inkling that you want to apply, if you can get that out of the way, it's got a shelf life, right? So, you don't have to be scuttling around and figuring out how to fit everything into your schedule. You can take it when you're in college. You can take it while you're working. You can, if you have an inkling that you might be applying to business school, take the EA, GRE, or GMAT.
Absolutely. That would be the ideal side. I wish clients would come to me saying, I already took it 3 years ago, I'm done. But usually they're like, I'm going to take it in 3 months. So
right.
That would be ideal.
And one thing I would say is, please don't keep test prep along with your application execution, which is like writing the essays and all. You could not want to kill yourself in a better way, in a slow torture.
Krithika, you're preaching to the choir. Like, that is so true. But the number of people who are not in that situation, right? They were just coming. They're like, I got to apply. I'm applying for round 2. My GMAT's not ready yet. I'm going to do it at the same time. And so you can't just tell them, oh, don't apply. It's like, well, let's figure out a strategy. Let's find a way that you can do the best you can in the time you have. And sometimes that means not applying to certain schools, Sometimes that means adding maybe a safety school that you weren't thinking about. But yeah, ideally you would be totally prepared, but that's unfortunately not often the case. So.
Right. The ones that are going for round 3 are probably more often than not the ones that don't have that time, that buffer of time. So where we are right now, as I think everyone knows, is that we're approaching round 2 deadlines, right? So that's like in about a month, right? And so depending on where you're applying. So we're kind of coming to a sort of crossroads where people might be saying, okay, I have to decide, am I going to go for it? Do I accelerate to make it in time for round 2? Do I put it off to round 3, or do I really put it off for next year? And I think that's the point. Maybe, I don't know if there's some advice surrounding that, or some trends perhaps that you've seen in round 1 or 2 so far that maybe.
No, I see a little bit of everything. Particularly this year, round 2, most of my clients who came to me round 2 this year didn't have the test ready, or they're in test prep, and I don't know why. Like that's usually one or two like that right now. Like pretty much most of my clients right now are still doing test and essay prep, which is not great. It's not an ideal situation, right. But it is what it is. So, yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot your question.
Any trends from round one, actually, based on either like what you...
So like I said, that's one trend I saw, particularly this round, round two. But then how they react to it is very, very different. I mean, I usually will have this conversation with them like, hey, you got the profile that you could go to this school and that school. I don't think you have the time to execute it well. Why don't you wait a year or wait till next year? And they're like, and most of them are no. Or sometimes I'll be like, I know you want to apply to 6 schools in 5 weeks. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think you need to cut off these 2 schools. And they're like, oh no, but that's my dream school. Like, okay, well, you do what you can. But then I do, I just got an email the other day from one of the clients who I told him several times, I don't think it's a good idea. He wrote me and said, I've taken your advice and I'm going to apply next year. So you have to listen to yourself and you have to do what's right. So.
Yeah, and this is where I feel that there's a lot of peer pressure out there, especially in some of these well-known industries. And more, one of the trends that I'm seeing is more and more people are using the years as ways of testing the waters and seeing whether they will be fit for a program or what else they have to enhance and so on. So I see the trend that a lot of them think that, oh yeah, I may not be prepared now, but anyway, reapplicants are okay later on, so let's try next year and so on. So that also I feel is contributing to the pressure of having to work on this for a longer period of time. So I want to add a question here to see, what do you think is an ideal time for someone to work on all these different aspects, like the test prep and the essays and the research?
Ideally a year. Like let's say you want to apply to the class. So we're class of 2020. You want to apply to the class of 2028. So round one is going to be in September 2025. You should be getting that GMAT out of the right now if you haven't done it. Like that is just get the test out the way. Ideally a year. I mean, that would be really the dream. You have plenty of time to just immerse in the GMAT or the TOEFL, the GRE, and not have to do other things, because most applicants are all working intense jobs. It's not like they have a lot of free time. So give yourself the time to have time to do the test prep. Once the test prep is done, there's school research, which takes time. It takes time to reach out to people, to talk to people. If you want to go visit schools, I mean, it's not necessary, but if you want to, that takes time to execute. It takes time to really think about your goals. So a lot of people are like, yeah, I want an MBA, kind of know what I want to do. That's not good enough for the essay. So a lot of times you need to spend time talking to people in different industries, learning about what the opportunities out there, really thinking about what it is you want to do. So even developing your goals takes time. Getting the recommenders on board. I mean, that's a big one because recommenders, it's out of your hands in a lot of ways. So first of all, you have to decide who it will be, which also takes time. You have to think about it. You have to be intelligent. Then you have to set up a talk with them. Then you have to kind of walk them through the process, onboard them, get them to say, yeah, I'm ready to go. And then stay on top of them so they get it done, right? So the closer you are to deadline, the more stressful that becomes. So one thing I'll often tell people who are applying with very little is that, okay, you're looking at these 3 guys for your recommender. Who do you feel comfortable with yelling at when it's 2 days before the deadline they haven't done it? Who would you feel comfortable calling? Oh, definitely not my boss. So he wouldn't like that. Well, then don't ask him. Ask the other guy, right? You have to think about that because it's going to be very, very stressful. So the more time you have to execute that, the better,
Definitely agree.
So can you
what's that?
Yeah.
I'll get the questions. Say that.
Yeah. So a lot of these, schools last year changed, and obviously we know that there's AI in the picture and so on. So what is helping candidates make an impression with their essays, especially in this year? As far as from round 1 and round 2 and what you're working with candidates?
To do what to their essays? I didn't catch the question.
Due to the AI coming into the picture, like AI bots and all.
Yeah. So as we all know, AI is still, it's not going anywhere. It's not leaving. It's a great tool. I don't think we all necessarily know how it's working out in the MBA admissions field yet. I don't think most of the schools really kind of know what their policy is yet. So what I'll often advise students, it's a good way to do fast research. Give me everything you can find about sustainability at Wharton or whatever, whatever kind of thing to kind of gather research. Probably not for writing essays. Yeah, you still have to do it. You still have to do the work,
Yeah. ChatGPT is really poor at telling your story. It doesn't know you. And it just ends up being this flat, boring, monotone thing that does not appeal to the...
And the language is not fun. And as a writer for a very long time, it is much harder to edit really bad work than to just start with good work, And so a lot of times maybe ChatGPT gave you something, but it's structured weird. It doesn't sound like it. So you're going to spend so much time fixing just write it yourself, right? So that's why you have brainstorming about your essays. And one of the questions I hear was by round 3, they've seen it all. How can the essays stand out? So one of the things I'm constantly telling my clients is the person reading your essay is a person. Maybe they overslept. Maybe they stubbed their toe this morning. Maybe they're getting married in 3 weeks. Maybe they have gas, maybe someone didn't come in, and instead of reading 15, they now got to read 30. Don't bore them. Seriously, their life, it's not the easiest job to be an admissions reader. Make sure you're answering the question. They don't have to look and go, what's he referring to? What? Make it flow, engage them, try to connect with them on a personal level, on a level as a person, right? That's a really big thing. I think the more boring the essay, the least likely it's going to get past the first couple of reads.
So did you have your share of boring essays thanks to ChatGPT this year?
I've caught a couple of my clients where I call them up and I'm like, did you use ChatGPT? And they're like, oh, just for parts of it. But usually no, because when I work with my clients, and I imagine this is your case as well, we do a fairly in-depth intake session, and we'll talk about the questions. So I'm just loving Harvard's new school questions this year. Like, they're brilliant. I honestly think they're some of the best essay questions I've ever seen, and they're fun to talk about. It's fun to sit there with my clients and saying, so what has influenced you? Why do you do this? And we start going, and stories are popping and ideas are popping. They're like, oh yeah, that thing. And it's just really, really fun. So if you do kind of that brainstorming, you're going to have your essay topic ready, right? And it's not going to be boring. But yeah, boring. I think our job as admissions consultants is to say, whoa, this is really boring.
Can we
tell a good story?
Yeah.
I mean, story is we're storytellers, right? And so it makes good sense to be able to tell a good story, and your background makes it, so vital as well, right? Being a journalist from your background. Can we talk a little bit about some success stories? Can we launch into that topic? Who have you worked with? What have you heard in third round for third round candidates?
Okay, I'll tell you. But one thing I want to say about the story, and another thing I think gets overlooked, is that this is not a literary exercise. Admissions is not looking for Shakespeare or a famous, some sort of beauty. It's like, it's okay if your writing is not elegant. It's okay if it's chunky and you're like, that's fine. You still tell the story. Like, you're not being judged on like how literary you are. Like, I think that's a big mistake, that people think, oh, I have to have the catchiest hook of the world. And it's like, it's nice, but just tell your story, answer the question, and, be engaging. So I think that's important, that it's not literature. To just don't forget that. And success stories with round 3. Honestly, my biggest success stories with round 3 have always been outliers. Like, a lot of, applying for an MBA is very much a self-selective process. Like, you who apply to MBA, usually did some sort of degree that put them on some sort of business career where it's kind of in their ecosystem. It's not like something that just comes out of the blue, right? They kind of know about it. So often my round 3 client, and so often those people will know, round 3 is not a good idea. I need to prep. They kind of know what they need to do. So often I won't even get those sort of like, superstar McKinsey people or amazing, Amazon, trailblazer in round 3. What I often get in round 3 is people who are really different. Like I said, like I had a filmmaker once. I've seen family company people quite a bit in round 3. So I'm not sure. I would love to hear from someone who's worked with more straight profiles in round 3. I know it exists. It's fine. I mean, it's just not.
I don't work with a regular consultant who had to come in round 3, but they had a very good reason for not applying in the previous rounds.
Yeah.
So they did get through, but they had like a GMAT score that went through the roof, and the kind of experiences, and in fact, like even the life instance that had happened to them in the past few months leading to the round made a lot of sense for them. So, as you rightly pointed out, one of the things I see often with people with round 2 and round 3, as Elle Woods would say, is a courage of conviction, to apply and knowing that, hey, life happened. I couldn't do it in round 1, but I'm very clear about what I can bring to the table and what I have to say and what I can offer. So that kind of sets them apart. Like I'm going to try it. So the ones really who get through are the ones who know that I'm not on ground, I'm just going to really like try my best. So even if it's round 2 or round 3, they are at the, at their best at the time. So those were the only ones who got through. And in fact, one had a very poor score too, but as you said, was literally like a forest officer. So there was nobody else like that person in the entire cohort.
So I think those people sort of have some luck, but it's again, the superstar client who a superstar applicant, we call them WOWs, sometimes walk on water applicants, for whatever reason, didn't get into 1 or 2, or maybe they only applied to Stanford in round 1 or whatever it is. And so now they're at round 3. And there are still spots. Round 3 would not exist if there were not open seats, right? And it would not exist if people who got accepted at, Berkeley weren't dropping it to go to someone else, or dropping, whatever, like kind of like this bleed that I was talking about. So there's definitely, spots for round 3 people. And for any profile, you probably do need to make it clear why you waited. I think it's not a bad idea. I don't know if it's necessary, but, it's like you said, there's usually a good reason.
Harvard's not had a round 3 as long as I've been in the game. I don't know when that changed.
It's been about 3, 4, or 5 years, maybe they dropped it.
At least. Why do you think schools like Wharton and Stanford, which are equally as competitive, haven't followed suit? Or
I can't speak for them, but I do think bleed has something to do with it. I think people do drop, not necessarily for Stanford. I think Stanford is so unique in the way they build their class. And like I said, that was the admissions director from there she said that there's always a chance. We always get amazing people. So there's definitely spots out there. I don't know why one school does it and not. Remember, Stanford also is one of the biggest classes. What is it, 900 people, close to 1,000? So they have these massive rounds. They go through a lot of applicants.
Sure.
So, but I'm not sure why the other schools. I mean, it serves them it serves their purpose. So yeah.
And one other thing is also like there's a weightless game.
Yeah, the weightless game.
And a lot of people see this kind of combinations and different decisions happening and so on. And it was very surprised that as we hear from the AdCom, even till the week before joining, there are some waitlist offers being given and so on. So I would say that the business school admissions right now reflects the world outside.
Yeah.
In terms of all the changes.
Yeah, you were going. The sound was cutting off. I think you're asking about like how waitlist affects round 3. Yeah, I mean, definitely waitlist is an issue. So waitlist, you apply in round 1 or round 2, and you get an interview and you get accepted. You get an interview and you get dinged. You get an interview and you get waitlisted. Maybe you don't even get interviewed, and then they put you on. They just put you on. It's not a waitlist, but it's like a waitlist, right? But you didn't interview. And sometimes those can last a really long time. I had a couple of clients from Europe last year who sat on the wait list until, really, really late, like May, June. And at that point, they're like, I can't possibly attend now. It's not going to work. So I don't know if they should be applying in round 3 and to better their odds, but I guess why not if you're waiting already? So yeah, waitlist is a bugger for sure.
Yeah.
So to finish off, because we're kind of running out of time, Candy, what's one piece of advice you would give to round 3 applicants to maximize their chances of success?
They have to, I think, number 1, do a self-assessment, like how, are they really prepared? Like, do they have what the schools, the basic requirements to do the self-assessment? Number 2, be truly realistic and make a school list that is realistic. And number 3, be extremely strategic. Think about, how you're going to order things and where you're going to apply first and how you're going to do this. And so that you can make very strong applications and make them on time. And also believe in yourself. I think it's like what Krithika was saying, you got to have that conviction, I find that if you're applying for an MBA, you've probably been pretty kick-ass all your life. Like you don't get to like, I'm gonna apply to M7 and you've been kind of, sloughing around. I don't know if sloughing's a word, but
try it out in an essay, see what happens.
I think, and if you have to do it, you have to do it. And even if you just want to do it, then do it. It's not like I shouldn't do it. Like you have to make that decision for yourself, right? So I don't know if there's a better piece of advice. Call all of us and we will help you.
Yeah, that too. I would say that's brilliant advice. And I always say the MBA application process is like your teaser or trailer of what's to come in the real movie of that MBA journey.
Yeah, it's like
I'll be prepared to take those decisions.
Yeah, because the MBA is so intense. So I often tell my accepted clients is like, if you can, try to take a couple months of vacation because you're not going to have any more vacation again for a really long time. Because the MBAs are so. I want to say one. I don't know if we have time, but one last thing about rounds. If you ever think about applying to INSEAD, they're very special. The way admissions has handled their intake, I don't know what their secret sauce is, but each round is competitive. They do not believe that someone applying in round 4 should be penalized because they're applying in round 4. So that's a school where it really doesn't matter. Probably there's no scholarship money left, but you would still have, odds as anyone else to get into that program. I think that's the only school I know of where it really, really doesn't matter.
Sure. Well, like I said, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Candy. Always good to see you. Always good to have you on the show. Thanks, of course, Bara and Krithika. Good hanging with you guys every Tuesday, as always, on MBA Waves. If you guys like this episode, give us a nice little thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to stay on top of all this free insight that will help you on your MBA journey. And for all the upcoming episodes, check us out at mbawaves.com. Bye, everyone.
Bye.